talk about each of the optional modules that are offered within the division. We've got module leaders here from each of the modules, and they're going to talk fairly briefly for 5 minutes about current research in dementia.
Hello everyone, I'm Claudia Cooper. I work here in Wing A, and I co-lead the dementia module with Liz Sampson, who's away on holiday at the moment but says hello. And our module, should you select it, takes you through different aspects of dementia and cognition. So some lectures on epidemiology. We also think about mild cognitive impairment and how you measure cognition. Last year, one of our informally top-rated speakers was a clinical psychologist who came in to talk about how cognition is measured and how dementia is treated from a psychological point of view in the NHS. And I'm aware that a lot of you are perhaps doing this as a stepping stone to clinical psychology. So we certainly take account of that and make sure that we include enough of the psychological perspective. We also go through pharmacological and psychological treatment strategies that are currently involved in dementia. And it's interesting if you're interested in dementia, and also perhaps as a paradigm for how illnesses are treated and viewed and how things change with evidence. And there's certainly dementia is something that has been quite politically high on the agenda. David Cameron, who was he? But he certainly, it was his absolute priority. I don't know whether it's Theresa May's. And it's interesting, I think, particularly at the moment in dementia, to see how politics and evidence and fears that people have about how as a country we're going to manage as an ageing society in which the prevalence of dementia is anticipated to increase. And obviously, when you have dementia, you require a lot of care. 80% of people in care homes have dementia. So it's an expensive and worrying illness for society. And certainly when people were asked recently in a survey what illnesses they most feared, dementia was right up there, because there's something perhaps about the feeling that you might lose who you are as a person, which is true of many mental illnesses, but perhaps particularly where there's a decline in cognition to which you are often at least partially aware. So this is the area that we cover. Liz and I come to the beginning of every session to be there if you have any queries in the module, and to be a focal point and to try to bring it together. We set you to formative assessments to write PowerPoint presentations, which we look at and send you personal comments. That sounds, do you know what I mean? Personalised comments on, to help you to improve how you present. And once a term, everybody gets an opportunity in a formative, which means not formally assessed way, to practice their presentation to the group. And that's been very popular because it means that when you come to the summative assessment, everybody's had a practice at presenting, and everybody has had feedback on at least 2 presentations that they've written. So it's a module that's had good feedback the last couple of years, and I would welcome and encourage any of you who would like to come and join us next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Vaughan, talking about introduction to neuroscience and mental health.
Hello everyone, so I'm just going to briefly talk about the Introduction to Neuroscience in Mental Health module. This is a module which is really designed to cover all of the major areas in neuroscience in mental health. So we talk about everything from psychiatric genomics, epigenetics, and its link to particular mental health difficulties and how that integrates with what we know about brain function, to neuroimaging, and we talk about EEG, fMRI, even some slightly more unusual neuroimaging methods that you may not have heard of before, so near-infrared spectroscopy that you'll get to have a go on. And we take you to a molecular biology lab, so you can see how DNA is extracted from blood and how that's sequenced and how that's turned into large genomic data sets. We talk about cognitive neuropsychiatry, so thinking about what are the cognitive and neurocognitive mechanisms in terms of memory and attention and problem solving that may be affected and may produce some of the symptoms and some of the experiences associated with mental health difficulties. So for example, we have someone from Essie Viding's lab come along and talk about psychopathy, and Chris Frith comes and talks about schizophrenia. We talk about RDoC, which is a new classification system based on our understanding of neuroscience rather than on diagnosis. We also think about psychopharmacology, how drugs function, both in terms of psychiatric medication and indeed street drugs, both of which are essential in terms of understanding and working in mental health. So the module is, in fact, it's our only module which is assessed in a kind of traditional way of having an essay. Actually, what we want you to do is a narrative review, which is essentially a type of review you find in academic literature where you synthesize the evidence and often you're arguing for a particular point based on your understanding, in this case, of neuroscience and mental health. But it's also quite a hands-on module, so we try and get you to see what neuroimaging looks like, understand a little bit about EEG analysis, understand what a molecular biology lab looks like. And it's taught by some of the folks here and also some of the folks over at the Institute of Cognitive Neuroscience. We try and draw quite heavily on the neuroscience and neuropsychology expertise we have here at UCL. It's worth saying that in the core research methods module, we have a lecture on kind of neuroscience methods, and we also have an optional, really early introductory lecture to about neuroscience. This is if you're a little bit rusty on it and you've done a bit before and you just want to kind of brush up, or you just want a better understanding of the sort of level, some of the kind of building blocks that you might need in order to do the neuroscience module. Okay, any questions on the neuroscience module before we move on to another one? Tone.
If you ever got a particularly strong neuroscience background from your undergrad, is it really, really hard?
The answer is no, and well, the answer is it used to be.
Okay.
So in the first year, we ran the course, which would be the 2 years before you guys start, and some people did find that. And so what we started last year was some of these introductory lectures as the optional one as part of the core research modules to try and bridge that gap. But they're really designed to engage people in exactly new and interesting topics. What we don't do in any of the modules is handhold you. What we expect you to do is to be able to independently go and engage with the subject and really kind of bring yourself up to speed. So what we try not to do is underestimate anyone's intelligence, but we also try not to overestimate anyone's knowledge. But we don't expect you to be an expert in stats or neuroscience or whatever it is. But if neuroscience isn't your thing, or you've not done much of it, but you're really interested, now's probably a good chance to do so. And that goes for all of the modules, actually. Okay, folks. Just to remind you, I'll be dashing off at 4:30, but anyone's welcome to drop me an email about neuroscience or any of the questions from now or from the beginning of the course.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Hayes. I'm a psychiatrist and epidemiologist, and I coordinate the epidemiological and social research methods in mental health double module with James, who I think you're expecting to present this. He's off sick today, and David Osborne, who's professor of epidemiology. And I didn't put these slides together because I probably wouldn't have put pictures of us up. Not sure if that's selling it. If we just think about what we cover in this module, so essentially we're thinking about observational study design in psychiatric research, how to design your own research and to understand research papers in a deeper and more comprehensive way, understand the major problems in psychiatric research, and then with Nicola's help we go through some qualitative work. There's a couple of lectures on randomized controlled trial design with Lynn Lewis, who I think was here briefly, and Michael King, who's the head of the trials unit here at UCL. And then we think about how this research evidence is applied, so thinking about how you disseminate your research and about public mental health with a member of our team who has previously worked in public mental health in Canada. And then we think about whether we can say what you've done in your research is truly causal. Okay, so whether we can say X causes Y rather than there just being this association. If we go on a couple of slides, I think this next one is not very useful. So basically what we're thinking about is the core epidemiological concepts and why epidemiology is important. So essentially this is all studies that you will see in the literature based on epidemiological concepts, so it's an important thing to understand. It goes very well with the stats module that runs just before it, and we try and tie those two modules together, although you can take either of those modules as a standalone module. The applications and limitations of randomized controlled trials, critical appraisal of papers, which you do in the core module, but we do in more depth. Looking at historical research and the application of research findings to public mental health. It's assessed by via a design of a protocol, so it's all very practical. So this is essentially what you might have to do if you're applying for a grant. You write a protocol for an observational study design, you write a protocol for a randomized control trial, or you look at some qualitative data and you produce a qualitative study. It's in the January term and it's 12 half days on a Friday afternoon, which is everyone's favourite time to be learning something new. Thank you. Any questions? That's again with our Twitter handle, so you can contact us via Twitter if you want to, or via UCL, obviously. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So, next up, Rebecca's not here. Our timetable is mental health services, policy design and valuation, but Sonia is going to present that at the end, along with current research in psychosis. So, shall we move to culture and clinic?
Yes.
Did you want me to put the slides
Yes,
up?
of course. Here. That's the only slide. And my name's David Goldberg. I'm not Shushrat Jadeh, who runs this course. He's flying in from India, and they, because of what's happening in Turkey, it's taken too long. Culture in the Clinic is designed to think of cultural issues that you'll meet in a variety of mental health settings. And the aims overall to generate concepts you can think about in terms of culture when you're in those situations. So it's very much use of self and thinking at the time. So it's using concepts largely from cultural psychiatry and anthropology, but also some linguistics, a little bit of health policy. The trouble is it's a very wide area, so it's selected. And I think the next general aim is to provide methods and theories which to understand or be able to talk about social and cultural processes. And finally, for you to feel confident in literature searching and using the available literature. There are a wide range of topics discussed, largely, next one. They're discussed in 2 hour seminars, often with outside people, and I come and present in one and engender a discussion. And there are a number of associates, which I'm one. There's Professor Moss from the neighbouring Department of Anthropology, he's Professor of Social Anthropology, as well as Sumi Jain. Because of the interests of the people presenting, there'll be a lot of focus on South Asia, but the response from last time was, can more examples and thoughts be given from other cultures? But each time there'll be a return to your experience in some way. And that is done between the seminars by having some often very simple exercise to do, and collection of evidence, and generating your facilities to producing ethnographic descriptions and then analysis of them. Let's link of the topics.
Sorry.
I'm going all over the place, I do apologise. I'm looking at the audience rather. I suppose these are the central issues about what concepts are helpful, how symptoms are culturally and context dependent in many ways, and this draws up the difference between relativism and universalism, which will be constantly talked about. Then there's the idea of how different people use their body in society, the relationship between body and society, the relationship between somatization and mentalization. Then there's a lot of focus on global mental health and local mental health and how they can coordinate. There's this discussion of how culture is used currently largely in psychotherapy. Schuschrut developed, and this department developed, a clinical cultural formulation, which is a method for generating information to think with the people involved about the cultural processes. Then there's some often critical reviews of biomedicine, and so part of it is how to put biomedicine or the medicine that you're learning about into overall social context, so there's less conflict between biomedicine and maybe local views. And I suppose partly because of Schuschrut's interest in marginality, that is often a topic. Marginality being, he's consultant with the homeless. If we can go to the last slide. Oh, maybe not. Oh yeah. I think it's the process of the course is concentrated on, so lots of feedback is wanted between sessions in order to tailor the next sessions, because culture can be seen as such a diffuse subject. It needs to be circumscribed and considered each time. The questions that it raises needs to be addressed in the next sessions rather than hang around. There will be opportunities to visit the medical anthropology seminars and discussion to ability to meet other largely psychiatrists and psychologists interested in cultural issues that they're struggling with around London. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very
Good.
much. Shall we? Yes. Should we stick roughly with our order and the lesson that we want to begin with? Just bear with me while I find it. Yes.
So I introduced myself earlier. I'm Rebecca, and I'm the module leader for the statistics in mental health research. So this is, as you can read, the overall aim of the module is to provide students who take it with the necessary knowledge of statistics and data skills to be able to analyse research data and to report and interpret the results. Do I need to press buttons myself to move on slides? Thank you very much. That's helpful. And this is just a brief overview of the things that we cover. So we've got 7 weeks, and we start. It's meant to be an introductory course. We have quite a mixture in terms of people's prior statistics knowledge. So we have people that really haven't done any statistics at all, or haven't done any for a very long time. And we have people who've actually covered quite a lot as part of undergraduate psychology courses. So we actually start really right at the beginning with some real basic stuff. So displaying and summarising data so we can get summary statistics. In the sort of middle weeks, we have some really key techniques, linear and logistic regression. We get a little bit more complicated and start building statistical models. And then in the final week, we cover a lot of advanced statistical techniques. And this is really an overview, so we don't expect you actually to put these techniques into practice, but it's to give you an overview of sort of where you can go from the course. But it's really meant to be an introductory course to establish you with some really key knowledge that you will be able to use in the future in research assistant posts, for example, in research careers, and more immediately for your research projects. I think you will find that you have a lot more confidence in analysing your own data if you're performing an analytic project, and if you've been on the statistics module. Okay, could you just skip that one actually? Okay, so who's the course for? So I think Sonia already mentioned that for some of you it will be a compulsory module. So if you're on the mental health sciences research stream, it's a compulsory module. And we expect that these students to have little or no prior knowledge of statistics, and that's why it is an introductory course, and we do very much sort of start from the basics. Other students opt to take the module, and it tends to be quite a large module actually. I think this year we've had perhaps around 30 students taking it. Last year we had even more. And some students actually opt to sit in on the module, so to not formally enrol because there's other modules that they want to take, but they find that it's something that may be very useful to them. And if we have, it is a little bit dependent on room space, but if we do have sufficient computers, it is possible to actually sit in on the module and to not take the assessments. So for students for whom it's optional, why would you want to do the statistics module? So I really do have a hard sell here. Why on earth would you choose to do statistics? Well, I've mentioned already a couple of reasons. One is that it will really help you if you're going to be doing an analytic research project. And it will possibly help you in your future career. It will give you the opportunity to learn a new statistics package, Stata, which is widely used in sort of all areas of academic research. It will help you to revise some key statistical methods, and it will hopefully, if you've done undergraduate psychology, give you a bit of a different perspective, a sort of a different approach. I know there tends to, in undergraduate psychology, be a lot of emphasis on p-values and statistical testing, so we try to take you a little bit beyond that. Thank you. So what the course is. So by the end of the course, it's a very practical course actually. It's very hands-on, and we have lots of practical exercises in Stata, deciding which statistical tests to use, analysing data, interpreting results. But we also want you to have a conceptual understanding of the statistics, why you're using them, what they're actually doing. The degree to which we achieve that, I don't know, but we do try to sort of supply that. That's sort of the intellectual underpinnings. But it's not a very sort of methodological course. Really, we want you to know the situations in which different statistics can be used, why you would use them, to apply them correctly, to estimate parameters and test hypotheses, and to know how to interpret and write up and report the results. So those are the really sort of key things. So what the course is not, and this is the slide which is designed to, I suppose, assuage the fears of some of you that might be considering doing the course, but I think it might be a bit terrifying dealing with numbers and statistics. So it's not the kind of course where you're expected to memorise equations. It can be useful to do that, but we're not testing you on that at all. We don't really expect you to be able to perform any calculations by hand. Okay? You will be using Stata, a statistics package, to do it. Sometimes in the exercises we do ask you to do a few hand calculations, but it's really aimed at helping you to understand the statistics and what you're doing. But really, the main objective is to be able to use a statistics package to analyse data. And you're also not expected to have an exhaustive knowledge of all statistical methods because we do only have 7 weeks. But I suppose one of the other aims is to give you an idea sort of where your knowledge begins and ends, and at the point at which actually now I know it's getting really difficult. I know I can deal with regression, say, but now it's getting really difficult. Now I know I need to ask a statistician. So it's kind of aimed to give you that sort of that kind of understanding of where statistics might go, but where for you it might end, and you have an understanding of the research questions, but you can't actually any longer sort of apply statistical methods. Thank you. So the teaching is structured, we do all of the sessions in computer rooms, and the teaching is very much broken up, so we have short lectures. I might give a lecture for perhaps 20 minutes or half an hour, trying to give you some overview of the techniques and trying to give some conceptual sort of underpinning. And it's broken up with a lot of practical exercises in Stata. And so we would do data analysis, there's lots of questions, maybe some of them in some senses are a little bit repetitive, but giving you different scenarios, reinforcing learning and giving you sort of different scenarios to help you to be able to interpret and report results from different in different contexts. We also provide you with solutions. We don't provide them during the lecture because we want you to think and to engage in active learning, but we provide solutions after the lecture so you can revisit what you've been doing in the practical sessions and go and sort of compare your own answers with a more model answer. So we do have quite a lot of reference materials available. A lot of people think, oh, it's a very practical module, we're just going to be sat in at the computer and that's it. But this is a master's course, so it is quite a high level, it's quite demanding, it's quite fast paced. We do go from quite basic to reasonably complex over 7 weeks. So there is a bit of reading associated with the course, some advanced learning, some preparatory exercises. We would expect you to finish the practical exercises if you don't have time in the lectures to go over the solutions, to review things, and maybe a few other pieces of optional reading material that you might want to look at. And just to point out that all of our single unit modules, you're expected to devote 130 hours to them, and that includes the assessment. So this is just to give you a sort of an idea of the amount of effort involved. So yes, and assessment. So the course is assessed, as most of the modules are, via coursework. It's the statistical analysis of the data set. You're provided with the data set, and we also give you specific research questions or hypotheses to address. You're then supposed to select the right statistics to answer those questions, to present your results, to write up a short report, present the results in tables or graphs and also in writing. And we like the style to be similar to that of a journal article. So we don't ask you to write the whole journal article, really just a bit of the methods section and the results section. But again, this act of writing up your research is potentially very helpful and beneficial in preparation for writing up your master's project. Okay, yeah, that's all that basically. We have a practice assignment. This year it's actually been an individual practice assignment, but I think next year we're going to change that and make it more similar to some of the other practice assignments on the course, and we're going to get you to do it as group work, which I think will also sort of facilitate discussion and enable people to compare the results and things they did and sort of discuss with their peers why their results might differ and what the best approach is. So I'm hoping that will sort of stimulate a lot of conversation and discussion as well. And we're going to have a feedback session on that, which will then hopefully equip you with the right skills to then move on and actually do the assessed assignment. So I have some more detail on the slides about sort of the detail of the topics we cover in each week, but I probably haven't got time to go into that now, so I think I'll end at that point. But I think the slides are going to be available, or if anybody wants to email me and or chat to me afterwards and sort of find out more detail about what the course covers, then I'm very happy to do that. Are there any questions at this stage?
Yeah. With sitting in, would we have access to the questions in the out of lecture materials that you might be using?
Yes. So the materials for most of the modules are put on Moodle, and the same would apply, and you would be given access to Moodle as a sitting in type student. So yes, you would. Yeah.
And do we need to register an interest or sign up?
Yes, I guess it's Chris is the right person to?
So do you mean registering for the module or just sitting in on it?
Yeah, that's
So
Chris administers that, doesn't she?
So it's called auditing in UCL, and what you need to do, you can audit any module in UCL actually. What you need to do is just contact the person, the module convener, and ask them if it's okay. Because obviously if you're not registered, the people who are registered get priority, and so they need to make sure that there's enough resources and that the room size is sufficient. But if you contact the person who's convening the module, ask if you can audit it, if you can sit in, 99% of the time you can.
What does that mean, the person who's convening it for? Does that mean me, or does that
yes,
mean
the module leader.
Okay.
The module leader,
Okay,
yeah.
that's fine. Please do get in touch with me, but in principle I'm very happy for anybody to sit in, but we would then have to sort of discuss room sizes and the number of students who are formally involved. Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, if anything springs to mind, or have fears about statistics that you want to talk to me about, not in sort of in front of everybody else, then feel free to chat to me afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. I know that there's several people who said, "Ooh, statistics," and hopefully you're feeling a little bit more reassured by that presentation. Yes, Bethany, the advanced treatment and management of dementia.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Vasiliki Orgeta. I'm a Senior Research Associate here in the division. I'm also a Senior Fellow of the Alzheimer's Society. I'm really struggling with hay fever, so apologies. Yes, so I'm a research psychologist and I'm interested in dementia, specifically psychosocial and psychological interventions for people with early dementia. I'm one of the module leads, and my co-module lead is Dr. Natalie Marchant. And you've probably heard from Dr. Claudia Cooper, so this is a follow-up module. It is also a single module as the current research in dementia. So I guess it's giving you some of the kind of key differences in comparison to the most basic, although still advanced module, is that it gives you an opportunity to familiarize yourselves with more kind of in-depth specialist knowledge in terms of both treatment as well as prevention of dementia, understand, for example, some of the key research questions that are actually driving the field at the moment. And one of the key skills, of course, are critically address research in dementia, acknowledge some of the limitations, and of course, where are we heading forward in terms of research. So this is an overview of the different of the advanced module. You will see the first 3 lectures centered around prevention of dementia. In the first, for example, lecture, you have the opportunity. Here we provide a summary of all of the evidence in terms of what is known for risk factors of developing dementia, specifically Alzheimer's disease, because this is where most of our knowledge comes from. But also we introduce you to the lectures after in some kind of emerging fields within the area of prevention of dementia. For example, the idea that potentially hearing loss could be an important marker of developing dementia, and also some of the recent, for example, mostly longitudinal research suggesting that social network composition, for example, people who are more likely to be socially isolated do actually have an increased risk of developing neurodegenerative diseases. Then moving on to some of the topics of timely diagnosis and equity of care, also some clinical evaluation in terms of the outcomes we are using to measure, for example, progress of disease. Halfway through the course, we teach you a little bit more in depth in terms of understanding neuropsychiatric symptoms, you will hear a lot about agitation in the first module. In the advanced module, you hear a lot about psychosis, for example, its neurobiological basis, and I teach you on depression and some of the challenges we're currently facing in terms of treating depression in people with dementia. And then towards kind of the end of the module, further specialized topics, for example, managing end-of-life symptoms, specifically pain when people approach end of life, but also psychosocial perspectives, in particular, how can we detect abuse, how we can prevent it, and some of the interventions, for example, that have been proposed. I actually have some more kind of detail in each of the sessions. Yes, so for example, this is some of the first sessions on risk factors and prevention. A lot of the sessions, of course, are comprised of a lecture, but then you also have the opportunity to do some group-related work. For example, here in the first lecture, you're discussing a potential intervention that you might think of that could potentially be used to prevent dementia, or for example, you could be comparing, selecting two risk factors to discuss how these risk factors could be related. I think in the next set of slides, yes, we have timely diagnosis, understanding what timely diagnosis mean for people with dementia and why it is important. And here to review some of the work, most of the work actually that has been conducted in the UK, you may have heard of it, for example, the National Dementia Strategy, and some of the results in relation to that. Some of the group tasks actually of the lecture is debating about screening. Should we be screening for dementia? What could be the potential, for example, pros and cons of this type of public health approaches? So this is the next set, yes. And so here I'm understanding a little bit more about the nature of psychosis in people with dementia, understanding some of the potential similarities, for example, in people without dementia, and some of the key differences, practical approaches. How should we be speaking, for example, in explaining psychosis to family carers, and together we will be looking at some of the epidemiology around depression, depressive symptoms in people with Alzheimer's, some of the key challenges in terms of identifying, for example, potential risk factors for depression and Alzheimer's disease, and looking at some of the kind of new emerging evidence in terms of treatments. Yes, we also have some sessions that is specifically devoted to understanding less common types of dementia, where we actually have less knowledge. For example, Dr. Susanna Walker is talking to you about dementia, the challenges in diagnosis and treatment. The next set of slides, yes. End-of-life symptoms, elder abuse and personhood. So the module finishes in terms of identifying, detecting, and measuring elder abuse, for example, in long-term care settings. And we finish with sociocultural perspectives in dementia, understanding, for example, what are the key subjective experiences for individuals, specifically in relation to the construct of person in dementia, has actually received quite a bit of theoretical interest over the years. And I think this is the last slide. Just give you an overview of the key skills you will be acquiring, understanding, for example, some of the key research questions for the field at the moment. And as most of the modules, there's actually quite a lot of comprehensive online material on Moodle, it's called, is it? And this is mostly published articles, but also there are some commentaries, clinical and
all other illnesses, including cardiovascular disease, on the same scale. And depression is now the leading cause of disability in both high-income countries and middle-income countries. And anxiety is probably about the same, actually, even though it doesn't seem to be quite so high on the league tables produced by this particular research. And so what we're trying to do in our module is really give you an idea of all the various ways that you can look at depression and think about it. So we've got lectures on the epidemiology and what the population caused of depression might be. But we've also got lectures on the different treatments for depression and anxiety. We have lectures on sort of physical treatments as well, such as ECT and even brain surgery. We have cognitive neuroscientists who try to explain it in terms of what the brain mechanisms might be underlying mood disorders, as well as people explaining theories from a more psychological perspective. So we try to give really an overview, and we don't necessarily try to pin it all together, partly because nobody can at the moment. I know sometimes we get comments saying, well, we've had all these very opposing views, how do we, but there wasn't any integration, and that's not just because we're trying to hide anything from you. It's really that there are lots of different disciplines which have tried to approach this massive public health problem, and we're trying to give you an idea of all the various ways in which this issue has been approached, even if we can't at the moment put it all together. And the assessment is going to be in terms of a presentation, a short presentation of 10 or 15 minutes, which will primarily be a subject of your choice. We'll give a lot of choice anyway in terms of which topics you can choose. But if somebody comes along and says, I really care passionately about X, then we'll dedicate and then present it. And we'll also have an MCQ. So that is really an outline of the module. So I don't know if there are any questions that you'd like to ask. Okay. It's been a long day. Anything? No. Okay, thanks very much.
Nick had just disappeared, so I need to do my own slides. Just 2 more modules to go. Let me just see if I can find. Do talk among yourselves.
Still being live streamed.
Yeah.
So they got a good live stream of my
Yeah.
whole head for a while. I'm so sorry.
What's that? No.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. It was just if you're going to be going up and down, I'm like, she should know that her head's being streamed onto issues.
I didn't realize my laptop was dying and I got on like 1% and I was like halfway through a job application. Just like darn it.
My name is Afi Ali and I'm one of the module leads for the module on current research in intellectual and developmental disabilities. The other module lead is Professor Angela Hasiotis. I just want to briefly say that we have quite an active division in terms of intellectual disability research, and there are 3 academics in the department. Professor Angela Hasiotis tends to do a lot of research on clinical trials. If you do the module, you'll also come across Andre Stridham, and he tends to do a lot of research on dementia and also genetics. And me, I'm Athia, and I tend to do research on stigma and impact of stigma and discrimination on well-being. Okay, so over to the aims of the module. So really the overall aim of the module is to give you an update of research that's relevant to clinical practice. We do a lot of seminars are on autism. I know many students are particularly interested in autism, so we do cover a range of topics that is relevant to autism. So we look at, for example, etiology, epidemiology, clinical presentation, and management of common mental health problems, and also management of autism. We give you an overview of the different types of interventions we use to manage people with intellectual disability and autism. And in addition to that, we hope that you'll also, from doing the module, you'll appreciate that people with intellectual disability and autism also experience a range of social inequalities such as stigma, discrimination. And we hope that you'll understand some of the challenges that you may encounter when you do research with this group. Okay. And this is just an overview of the course content. So I won't really go into much detail, but we cover things like genetic disorders and genetic syndromes that are associated with intellectual disability and autism. We look at mental health problems in people, in adults and children. We look at offending behaviour in people with autism and intellectual disability. We look at range of interventions. Next slide. And we look at things like the structure of services and how services for people with intellectual disability are delivered in the UK and abroad. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the course covers. In terms of the assessment, so like the previous module on depression, we have two different types of assessments. So we have a 15-minute oral presentation on a topic of your choice, as long as it's relevant to people with intellectual disability or autism. And this year we've introduced a computer-based MCQ exam as well. And the teaching, it's like when you get the modules, it's delivered in a seminar form. So we have 7 seminars with additional material on Moodle. We also have individual and group tasks throughout the module. I think that's pretty much it. In terms of the students that do the module, some students have a background in intellectual disability. Perhaps they've done work experience placement, but many of the students have had very little prior contact with people with intellectual disability, but they're still interested in doing the module. So I hope you pick the course. And if you've got any questions, please email myself or Angela Hasiotis. Any questions? Yeah.
I want to know if the course is primarily focused on autism, or is there an equal focus on other?
Yeah, there's quite a broad focus. So I'd say a large proportion of it is on autism, but we do cover intellectual disability broadly. And we also cover other topics like ADHD, which kind of falls into the neurodevelopmental category.
So we'll finish off with the 2 modules that we've skipped out on the list. If you notice that, Sonia's going to talk about current research in psychosis and mental health services.
Okay, so 2 more modules to go if you're still able to focus on these. One is one that runs in the first term, and that's taken, we find, by quite a lot of students. I think about 2/3 of this year's intake have taken this module, which is the one on current research in psychosis and bipolar disorder. And it's an overview. I think actually this year it's going to be over 8 Friday mornings of the most significant current and recent research in psychosis, including schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. The whole bit is taught by people either within UCL or from outside who are kind of prominent in the field. All of the people who teach on it are actively engaged in doing the types of research that they talk about. And we arrange it so that it follows immediately after a psychosis day on the clinical mental health module. So that gives you the sort of background for the clinical features and treatment and stuff with psychosis and bipolar disorder, and then the module then focuses on the current research areas that are important at the moment. And we're aiming, as in all the current research modules, to bring together in the modules biological, psychological and social perspectives on psychosis and bipolar. So it's very much something that runs through the whole course, that we're not kind of in favour of biological or in favour of psychosocial as a kind of department, but that we're interested in how those perspectives can be brought together in an integrated way. In terms of the sort of tasks and assessments, there's a group task during the module, which is to prepare group presentations on topics that include giving us preparing a wiki article on what the causes of psychosis are, what the causes of bipolar are, a set of sort of group tasks that ask the students to bring together the various aspects of the module. And the assessment is another one of these short MCQs. It's an hour's MCQ that's just worth 5 credits. And then for this module, we asked students to prepare a poster in conference format that's about an area of psychosis research that's of interest to them. And we've actually really enjoyed having a sort of posters morning or posters day here, where students present to groups of other students and staff and talk briefly about their posters. So that's the assessment for it. In terms of what we cover, these are the kinds of major questions which span neuroscience and psychological and social intervention. So they include looking at genetic neuroimaging and neurocognitive models of how psychosis and bipolar are understood. We do some sessions on psychological treatments and the current evidence for the effectiveness of psychological treatments. There's also a focus on early psychosis and approaches to trying to prevent the onset of psychosis or trying to intervene early with psychosis. Quite a lot of the student placements are actually in early intervention services for psychosis. So in this module, we look at the evidence for those services. We also look at drugs and what we know about drug effect mechanisms and effectiveness, and where current research is going in the pharmacology of psychosis and bipolar disorder. We look at families and what the evidence is on family roles in psychosis and bipolar, and how families can be worked with in these conditions. And finally, also on the social difficulties that people have with psychosis and bipolar, and how the strategies that are being tried to intervene with those. So it's a whole range of perspectives on psychosis and bipolar from people who are currently actively engaged in research in those areas. So that's one module. We're on to our last module in a moment. Anyone want to ask anything about the psychosis and bipolar one? It has proved quite a popular part of what we offer. Okay, so the other module I'm going to talk about is one that I teach on, but not one that I organise. But Bryn Lloyd Evans and Helen Gillespie, who are the module leads for this last one, are not here today. So we run a module in the second term on mental health services, policy design and evaluation. So the idea of the module basically is to train students in how to select and apply methods for evaluating services, evaluating mental health services, and evaluating the outcomes of complex interventions in sorts of psychosocial treatments in mental health services. And the other goal is for students to gain a greater understanding of how mental health systems and mental health services get researched. And it proceeds from the understanding that you'll get from the core modules in areas like clinical trials. So it's a single module, 7 classes, and again a group element in which there are 3 assignments that people do in the module work as a group, things like designing a service evaluation that you'll come back and present to the rest of the group, having worked on as group tasks. And the assignment is a piece of written work that gets submitted, I think, in about April, focused on services research and designing a piece of services research. So what's covered, it includes classes on how people develop complex interventions, so how you might develop, for instance, in this department at the moment we've got a grant to develop an intervention to try and reduce loneliness among people with severe depression and anxiety, and we're looking at various forms of evidence and theory to try and help us put together the best intervention we can, then conduct a sort of very preliminary feasibility study, and we'll go on to try and conduct a larger scale evaluation of it. And that's the sort of complex intervention that you'll learn how people develop and how they test in using methods like randomized controlled trials. And the module also looks at what's called implementation research, which is where people think about once you've found some evidence for something that an intervention works. So for instance, there's quite a bit of evidence that certain types of family intervention work in psychosis, but they're actually not provided that much in practice in a lot of services. And implementation research is where you focus on how do you actually, what are the barriers and how do you actually get interventions that have some evidence base provided in real life settings, and how can you study that process. So we'll also look at how services are audited and at how people develop and put in practice service improvement programs. So it's a very practical module focused on how people find and test ways of improving people's care. We find quite a few of the clinicians on our MSc programs take the module because it's quite practically helpful to them, but so do quite a few of our non-clinical students as well, and they've found it has quite a lot of practical application for the future. And there are also elements of it that are classes from expert tutors on these topics, on health economics, on qualitative research into services, on what's called on public involvement, the co-production, which is where people work with service users and carers and other kind of key people to try and develop services which fit their needs. The module also contains some class on global mental health research, on researching services in other countries, and on the links between research and policy and how research does or doesn't influence policy. So that's and that's I think why Helen and Bryn think it's a qualification to do this module. Okay, so that I think completes our lineup of modules. We've got some more tea and coffee and some cake to try and restore your blood sugar after this afternoon. But any more questions for anyone before that? So we'll hang around a bit and be available to answer any further questions that occur to you. Okay, great. Now I think some of you have signed up, haven't you, for this evening's risk assessment event with just on time. This is Andre Tomlin, otherwise known as the Mental Elf, who's somebody we suggest you follow his blog and follow him on social media as the most sort of up-to-date source of evidence on mental health research. And so we're running this event with Andre this evening, and I think some of you have signed up for it. So Nicola, I think it's a stick around here to do what you like, but if you to meet up with you here at 5:45,
yeah,
and head over there. Do you want to introduce yourself, Andre?
No, that's great. Hello everyone.
questions that you might have left. All right, and we'll hope to see you. I think we've told you the date for induction day, haven't we? Wednesday the 28th. It's something like the 28th of September, whatever's the last Wednesday in September. So we'll be hoping to see you then. So, thank you.